I'm Rachael Degar, and this is The Truth About Aging. Thanks for joining me today. I had the pleasure of spending time with Dr. Sandra Kaufmann, who's a medical professional, an author, and a biohacker who uses her experience in cellular biology to better her own life, and she is kind enough to share all of her tips and her knowledge with us so that we can do the same. Stay tuned for an amazing time with Dr. Sandra Kaufmann. Join me and experts from all over the globe sharing knowledge with you about living healthy longer, smarter, fitter and happier. Scientists, doctors, researchers and biohackers. You'll learn everything here about how to be your best you. I'm Rachael Degar. Welcome to The Truth About Aging. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Sandra Kaufmann. Sandy's an accomplished medical professional, educator with a master's degree and a medical degree. She's founder of the Kaufmann Anti-Aging Institute and author of 2 books, Why We Age and How to Stop It, and Aging Solutions. Love it. They basically tell you exactly what their name is. So if you haven't read them yet, go and find them. The books aren't about diet or exercise. It's about how cells age, because that's how we age. Makes so much sense. Sandy's a rock climber, a biohacker. She uses her medical expertise and her background in cellular biology to constantly improve her own health, tell us how to improve ours, reduce her aging, and advise us all how to do the same, which I absolutely love, because isn't that what we're all after? So welcome, Sandy. Hello. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you so very much. This is a pleasure, and this is going to be fantastic fun.
Yeah, this will be fun. Now, I'll let you know to everyone listening, Sandy has dared me to ask her questions, which perhaps other people haven't answered. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Sandy does talk about, and then I'm gonna push her anywhere she wants to go. She's a rock climber. She likes to be pushed, right, Sandy?
Yes, I do.
Now, firstly, you have a totally medical background, and now you're advising people holistically. Now, that's it's
no,
not
actually, I'm not. No.
Tell
I am
me.
not. No. Holistic medicine suggests that everything you use is natural.
Mm-hmm.
I do not care if something is natural or not. My take on health and medicine is molecular biology and cell biology, and what molecules we can utilize to optimize all of our cellular systems. So I do not care if a molecule was, discovered 3,000 years ago, or if it was invented in a lab yesterday. If it works, and I'm all for it. So I'm not holistic. It sounds fantastic, but that's not me.
No, well, we actually use the word differently down under. So holistic means doing everything you can, but treating a person as a whole body rather than.
Oh.
So holistic just means whole. So I've just learned that about the States. I have to change my lingo.
Very interesting. Yeah. So no, I believe in absolute whole body via cellular pathways. And I believe in prophylactic treatments rather than waiting until you get a disease. So if we can prevent rather than waiting to be miserable like we do in Western medicine, then we win.
Yeah. So what took you, because I wish that every medically trained doctor would think that way, but it's you're a minority, really. So what was the point where you went, nah, this system just isn't working, I've got to look at this differently?
No, this sounds terrible, but I will tell you that it's a completely selfish thing that I did. As you said, I'm a rock climber, I'm a mountain climber, but I was a cell biologist before I went to medical school, and I have the advantage now of being an anesthesiologist. So I deal with pharmacology, cell biology, disease processes, and all that. And if you take all of those things and combine them, I realized that to be an athlete going past my mid-40s and like literally hanging on to cliffs, I needed to decelerate the aging process. And so I was kind of bored sitting in my office being on call all the time. And so I just started Googling, this is like 10 years ago, why we age. And some of the information was absolute garbage. And some of it was really actual true science. And if you think about aging, most people will look at various pieces and parts of their body. My vision is going, my hangovers are worse than they used to be, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, you age because your cells age. And I realized that cells fail for very specific, fixable reasons. And then if you look at a cell and you see why it's failing, because different cells fail for different reasons, like the ratios are sort of skewed, you can trace that to the basis of most diseases. And so if you fix your cells, you can theoretically prophylax or reduce relative risk of most of the diseases of aging. So it all sort of made sense from a completely selfish point of view of me not wanting to age, and then applying it to other people around me. And the reason that other people came to me is I was sitting in my office. I was the chief of anesthesia for, a decade at a children's hospital. And I started doing all this crazy stuff to myself, and people would sneak into my office and they're like, what are you doing? We want to do that too. And so it sort of grew and grew and grew. Which then became 2 books and lecture series and, whatever it is that I do now. It came from a very selfish perspective of, I want to hang on to a cliff longer.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Who better to read a book on how to stop aging than someone who just loves living? Because that's what you were invested in, but just have this huge wealth of knowledge to put into it too. So, that's amazing to learn by that. And I guess too, like in how I think of the word holistic, is that you're not compartmentalizing, like, oh, my eyes are going bad, I need to fix my eyes, or what can I take to stop my hangovers getting worse? Because it's likely if your hangovers are getting worse, that pretty soon your eyesight's going to start going bad too. And then pretty soon your heart's gonna, do you know what I mean? We're just one being. We're just a bundle of cells.
Oh, no, absolutely, without a doubt. And I always, like in my book, I treat a cell like a little factory, and factories make proteins, and that's how your body works. The difference is what different proteins they spit out will, constitute different disease processes. So rather than when people look at how to fix aging, there's the theory that you just put in all the proteins that you're missing, meaning hormonal replacement, or, there's a variety of proteins that people replace. My train of thought is always fix the factory that made the proteins, and then you're going to fix all of them, because your cells make up to 10,000 proteins, right? It is far easier to fix the factory than to put out every damn little protein. So that's my sort of point of view in terms of longevity. And then the other people, in terms of in the Western or over here in the States, when you think about holistic medicine, everyone's into, meditation and yoga and blah, blah, blah. And that is so not me. So I am a basic science physician, I think that all those things are probably good for you, but I don't know a damn thing about them.
And I love in your books and in your discussions and things, you don't ever differentiate, as you said, between natural, synthetic, medical, available on the shelf. For those of us who can't just write prescriptions for ourselves, but who kind of go, ooh, metformin sounds amazing. What's your kind of recommendations there? Is there something natural that is an ilk to it, or is there a certain type of doctor you go to help out? Like, what do we do if everything's not available to us?
So there's several things you can do. So number one, some things are replaceable with natural products. Metformin and berberine, prime example. They're very similar. They're not the same, but they do significantly overlapping things. Some people like one, some people like the other. Studies actually show that if you take a little bit of each, they're synergistic and you do better, but you certainly can take one or the other. Some drugs are irreplaceable. They're just what they are in terms of potency, and you need to either go to your primary care physician, a longevity physician, or you can cheat and get them from the International Drug Mart like I do and import them from wherever it is that is across the globe without paying insurance and letting anyone know that I'm doing these things. Alternatively, there are a significant number of natural things, and sometimes they're started out natural and they got sort of processed to make them better or more bioavailable. There are a lot of alternatives. I've been rating agents now for 7-8 years. I think I've got like 50 some on my list.
I love your rating system. I love it.
Thank you. It started because I couldn't keep track of them all. I mean, it was insane. Like this does this and this and but this is slightly better than this and blah, 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 blah. So I turn to my rating system all the time. I keep my master list, 1,000 numbers on it because I have to. It's just too much information to keep track of at one point.
Yeah. And so for those who haven't read Sandy's book yet, her rating system breaks each supplement or medication down into 7 different things and rates it on how good it is at all of them, 1 to 7. So I was going to ask you, and obviously you say if you want to tackle aging, you've got to cover all of the 7 tenets of aging. So you can't just say, take this one thing and it will be incredible and suddenly you'll have the fountain of youth going on inside you. However, let's say, for example, cardiovascular, if I've got cardiovascular problems, should I be looking to have the over and above your rating system for that to make up for it?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So cardiovascular disease occurs for several reasons, right? It occurs because all of your cells are aging. So number one, most people with cardiovascular disease are over the age of 40, right? Unless you have a genetic predisposition, then it can be earlier. So by definition, all of your cells are already failing. So what I usually do is I recommend that people start with what I call the panacea, which covers most of the aspects of aging. But then specifically cardiovascular disease, and especially atherosclerotic disease, has to do with oxidative damage, causing inflammation in the vascular wall, as well as lipid deposition. So then we would take, on top of the panacea, we focus on things that reduce oxidative damage, obviously, right? You can reduce the activity of the macrophages, bringing lipids in, and you can actually change your lipid count in your blood. Interestingly enough, your sirtuins, which is tenet 3, which are the pathways of aging, you have 7 mammalian sirtuins. 3, 4, and 5 control your mitochondria. 3 determines the energy source of your mitochondria. And as you get older, you lose 3. So by boosting sirtuin 3, you can change the lipid composition and therefore reduce relative risk of cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease is a fantastic example. It's multifactorial in terms of having to cover various agents. But this is sort of what we do, right? You take things to cover your age, and then we highlight different disease processes via the 7 tenets.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very different view to Western medicine, which is you've got a cardiovascular problem here, take a cardiovascular drug. What you're saying is you're looking at 3 or 4 different causes that are all happening before you have that cardiovascular condition, which is this is why I'm saying you just make sense, Sandy.
Yeah, so Western medicine waits until you have coronary disease or your coronaries are filled, then they stent you, and then they put you on a statin, and then you're in heart failure, and then you stroke out, and they go, oh, gee, that's too bad. Well, we know that's the pathway. So why don't we prevent the pathway? Because we know for the most part why it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, we just, and you can look at most major diseases and figure that out. Right now, I'm sort of obsessed with neurovascular disease, not neurovascular disease, neurodisease, right? Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, most brain diseases are conditions of protein accumulation. So that means that proteins in the cells become dysfunctional, they cluster together, and they cause cellular dysfunction. Well, it turns out your body, in my quality control issue, which is another tenet, you have to control your proteostasis. So upregulating your proteostasis mechanisms could reduce relative risk of brain disease. And you can do that. You can use heat shock proteins to upregulate your chaperones, which control your proteostasis. So these things are doable if it's prophylactic. It's very hard once you're behind the 8 ball.
Yes. Yeah. Prevention is always better than a cure for something which is sometimes incurable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'm a goofball. I'm sorry, I take 70 things because every time I read something, I go, oh my God, how could I not do that? And then of course I do it. And then the pile just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but so be it.
Yeah, it's expensive to live longer, but I mean, what price do you put on your health is always the question.
Well, the way I figure it is everyone I know goes to Starbucks once or twice a day, and those things are like $7-10, right? So if I spent $20 a day on my pills, which I probably do, so I had a couple coffees, right? It reduces the cost of going to the physician.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Hey, let me just quickly go back because we mentioned metformin before, and
Okay.
most people watching this know that I'm the topical telomerase girl, and love that. Now, I read somewhere you saying that metformin can increase the length of telomeres.
It can. You got me off guard there. I don't exactly remember the mechanism. So telomeres, I mean, you're the queen of telomeres. So I don't want to be preaching to the choir.
No.
Telomeres get short, as far as I'm concerned, for three different reasons. And Bill will probably have my head for this. Obviously, there's replicative decrease in length of telomeres, but there's also oxidative stress and glycation stress. The single-stranded aspect of your telomeres is half of it is guanine, right? Guanosine, not guanine. Guanine is bat poop. Guanosine. And it is more likely than any other nucleotide to be oxidized or glycated. In fact, you have 100,000 lesions per cell per day. So if you reduce your oxidative stress and you reduce your glycation, you can maintain your telomeres in a healthier state. Thus, they're not going to get reduced in that way, right? You still have replicative stress, but they're less likely to be reduced endogenously through other stresses. Therefore, metformin, because it lowers glycation stress, lowers the risk of losing telomeres.
Right. So you're really
How about that?
slowing down the aging process with that.
Oh, you're doing it many things. I mean, I know that you're obsessed about telomeres, and I think that's fantastic. But that is one aspect. It's one fraction of an aspect of aging. In my tenet one, which I call DNA alterations, right? There's telomere length, which is crucial. But then there's also epigenetics, and then there's also the structure itself of your DNA. All of these things take a dive over the course of time, and you sort of have to fix all of them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love how you call them tenets. Dr. Melandrews calls them sticks of dynamite. You know, which one's burning the quickest, but they're all going to go off. It's all going to create a bomb if you don't sort them
Oh
all
yeah,
out.
and right. And it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like which one's going to get you first? And you just sit there, and in each of the 7 tenets, there's subcategories. And these subcategories keep growing. At one time in my mitochondrial category, I think I had 3 issues. Now there's 7 issues. But if you just tick off a little bit on each one, you're reducing relative risk of disease and increasing your lifespan. Versus, not doing anything, which is what most people do. And we've done this experiment now for 100,000 years. We know that people die of horrible things. So we might as well be proactive. And it boils down, of course, to the risk-benefit ratio. And if there does not seem to be a lot of risk and there's only benefits, then why would you not?
Yeah. So people wanting to begin, they're probably going to want to start with what you call the panacea, which would be your kind of basic recommendation for every single person interested in longevity. Tell us what the panacea is. Get your pens and paper out, everybody.
Okay. The reason this is called the panacea is just because it's damn funny. And the letters sort of spell out, at least they start to, panacea. And what happened is when I was doing this once upon a time, and this again started a very long time ago, the top agents at that point, there were 15 of them. And the question was, how many things are people willing to take? And what's at the top of the list so that all of the tenets are covered most effectively? And I asked around, everyone's like, you know what? I'll take 5, maybe 6. That's it. You go, okay, right? So I sort of created the panacea to apply to most people. Anyway, so what is it? P stands for pterodistobine. And the reason that is extraordinarily important is because sirtuins drop over time. Sirtuins control all cellular homeostasis. And again, there's 1 through 7. The important ones are 1, 3, and 6, but 1 is the mastermind of all of your sirtuins. So if you're not activating your sirtuins, you're kind of behind the 8 ball. The question is pterodistobine versus resveratrol. I like pterodistobine better. I think it's more bioavailable. Resveratrol has more literature on it, and it's less bioavailable. However, now they put it in the liposomal concoction, so it's actually pretty decent. The choice, if people are thinking about it, there's a paper that suggested that if you have any lipid dysfunction, you should not use pterostyl and go straight for the resveratrol. That's really the only caveat. It doesn't really matter which one, as long as you get something that's reasonably bioavailable. So that's the first letter. Panacea, the second letter is A. So A stands for astaxanthin. Oxidative damage is hugely important as you get older. In our mitochondria, we use oxygen because we have to. 1 to 7% roughly develops into what we call free radicals. Free radicals destroy cells. They destroy DNA, proteins, and lipids, especially bad in your brain because lipid peroxidation will cause significant brain damage. So we need something that squelches basically all of the free radicals. Astaxanthin is a absolutely natural substance. It comes from algae that gets pissed off. As my kids say, is that the angry algae one? I'm like, yes, it is. So when algae gets mad, why does it get mad? Oxidate or something in the environment stresses it out, be it temperature, nutrient depletion, whatever have you. It creates this orange pinkish goo, and that is astaxanthin, and it's in all of the marine systems. So it's in salmon, it's in like the beaks of those pink birds, ibises, it's in quail eyes. Anything that's pink is astaxanthin. Anyway, so there is absolutely no downside to taking astaxanthin unless you have gout. That's a problem. But anyone else can absolutely take astaxanthin. And what's really cool about it is if you have very pale skin and you're in the sun, it blocks sun damage. So
I
you
was
kind
going
of
to
know
ask
that
you
it's
that, and then I thought, knowing me and you, will go on a very long tangent. But let's just go on a tangent.
I know, right? No, I mean, we can go on a tangent.
Well,
I just love stuff.
Well, because I'm in New Zealand, and we have a lot of Australians who'll be listening to this as well too. There's a hole above the ozone in New Zealand, and for example, one of my daughters, her skin is translucent. She's a very, very pale kid with white hair. And it's, we have to be slapping on sunblock every 3 hours at most during summer here. We have a 10-minute burn time. So I actually just said to her this morning, I said, I'm interviewing a doctor and I'm going to ask her, if you were to take astaxanthin every day, I wonder, would that help? I couldn't take away the sunblock, not in the environment that we live in, but I wonder if it would help.
So do it absolutely will help. Absolutely. I don't live where you live, but I live on Miami Beach. We have a lot of sun. I'm clearly translucent. Both of my daughters are very pale, especially my redhead. She doesn't do it as much as she used to, but she used to be outside all the time playing competitive tennis. And when she didn't take her astaxanthin, it was a disaster.
How does that work? Is there a how to this, or is that too much of a tangent?
No. So it basically it gets into your system. So there's adjuvants and there's supplements. Just as a yet another tangent, if you take something and your body already has it, it's a supplement. And the reason that that's important is your body has a way to get rid of it faster, right? Adjuvants don't necessarily, they have to go by the standard process of sort of being gotten rid of. Astaxanthin has a very long half-life. When you take it, it goes out to your mitochondria. It quelches free radicals. And it also quelches free radicals that derive from the sun, right? The sun actually creates free radicals that destroys your DNA. It causes inflammatory issues in your cells. It also melts your DNA together into CP dimers, which are bad, which you can actually fix with something else. But again, that's a tangent. Anyway, it gets into the membranes of your mitochondria. It sits there, it sucks up free radicals, and then you excrete it 24 hours later. Has absolutely no side effects, which is amazing. And it just blocks the inflammatory response, which means it blocks the sun damage and protects your DNA. Most people, like the low dose is 4 milligrams. You can take up to 8, 16. There's really no limit. I started recently taking a liposomal, I want to say it's 24 milligrams. And I've had no side effects because there just aren't any. I will tell you that,
because lots of people here are going to be wanting to pop this into their kids. What would the dose for kids be?
Absolutely. So if you're under 60 kilos, I would probably just stick with 4 milligrams.
I'm writing this down. I got my pen and paper too, everyone. Yep.
If you're a teenager and you're like, 70 some kilos, I would go with 8. If you're out in the sun all the time, if you're a runner, if you have an outdoor job, then you can go with more. 12 is fine.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a lot of people right now going, yes.
Yeah, they're on Amazon going astaxanthin.
Yeah. And actually it's one of the supplements that isn't too expensive either. That's a reasonably priced one, which is good.
Yeah, and I just know that myself and my two kids are going to be taking it every day for like 100 years. So I buy it in massive bulk, and of course that reduces the price.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean,
Awesome.
literally, it sits on the counter next to the multivitamin. I mean, it's my kids' friends come over and they're like, "Can we have some astaxanthin?" I'm like, I mean, it's we're the drug house, which is really, funny, but not. That's we don't give cocaine
You're the
out. Just
longevity pimp.
yes, I am. And it's really funny is I've had my kids' friend's mother call me and go, "Hey, our kids are friends. Can I talk to you?" And I go, "Of course." Anyway, so that's the astaxanthin gist.
Yeah. So we've got pterostilbene,
Panacea.
astaxanthin, which is so multi-beneficial by the sounds of it.
Oh, it's amazing. It also upregulates your endogenous free radical scavengers. So it increases your catalase, your glutathiones, your SODs, all that sort of thing. And it's also anti-inflammatory. So it is just soup to nuts, just a fantastic supplement or adjuvant to take.
And you would swap, so if you're currently just taking a standard omega, you'd swap your omega for an astaxanthin, you think?
I would take both. They do different things.
Okay.
They just absolutely do different things. Omegas are, well, anyways, that's a whole nother crazy tangent, but the answer is they're different.
Okay.
Okay, back to the panacea. So PAN, N stands for some sort of nicotinamide precursor.
Mm-hmm.
We know that NAD is extraordinarily important. Over the age of 40, most people are deficient. You need NAD for 4 different processes in your cells. You need it to make energy because it's part of the electron transport chain. You need it, your body actually takes pieces of it apart to fix your DNA when you have DNA damage. And you actually have 10 to the 4th to 10 to the 5th DNA errors per cell per day that your body has to fix. So you eat up a lot of NAD doing this. And as you get older, of course, you need more to get more DNA damage. Mm-hmm. NAD is also a cofactor or a coenzyme for sirtuins. So we mentioned sirtuins earlier. That's cellular homeostasis, and you can activate sirtuins as much as you possibly want, but if you are NAD deficient, it doesn't work. So they sort of go hand in hand in that category. As well, NAD serves as a communication device between your mitochondria and your nucleus. So when you become deficient, your cellular homeostasis in terms of communicating how much energy you have sort of gets kerplunked. So there are 4 reasons that you need NAD. And we know, and we don't exactly, I mean, well, we sort of know why, but levels decrease as you get older. So over the age of 40, you are probably deficient by default. Therefore, it's an absolute mandatory thing to add to your pile.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question is always,
Which is your favorite? Yeah, so NR or NMN, like, because this is a costly supplement. So if somebody's looking for an NAD precursor, what would you recommend?
So that's an excellent question. I mean, NMN and NR are very close. It's one enzymatic step away from each other. I've been approached by, various companies. Will you represent us? We're better than they are. And the answer is I have no evidence that one's better than the other. I think that they're both very, very useful. You can also get it IV. You can get nasal spray. You can get a patch. Everyone's competing to sell you their NAD precursor or straight NAD because it's really, really, really important. Mm-hmm. To be perfectly honest, I use NMN, and the only reason I do that is I buy it in massive bulk. I can't seem to get NR in massive bulk, but I can get NMN in it. So that's what I use.
So just
I no way am I. It honestly, it's cost. That's I don't, I mean, I used to vacillate. I went back and forth, and I just don't really think that there's that much of a difference. So if you can get one, that's slightly less expensive, I would do that. Okay,
perfect. Yeah. Little tangent here for us. For people who've never heard of sirtuins, can you give us a quick, like, why, because you keep coming back to them, what makes them what makes them so essential that you keep going, come on folks, you're sirtuins?
Right. I know it does sound sort of silly, right? So there are pathways in your body controlled by your genes that turn different enzymes on and off, and they control all of your homeostasis. So sirtuins, I mean, it's really silly. They're histone deacetylases. I mean, it doesn't seem like they would do much. They take they take acetyl groups off of lysines. I mean, that's it. It doesn't sound very fancy, but they're sort of all over your cells, and they're basically, they directionalize which way your cells are going. So sirtuin one, again, I love the word cellular homeostasis, because this is what you lose over the course of time, and they control it. They control your circadian rhythms. You know, we always hear that people as they get older can't sleep at nights. Well, your sirtuins are deficient. You fix your sirtuins, you're going to go to sleep. That's a no-brainer. It controls your oxidative stress. It controls where your fat gets deposited. You know, as you get older, people say, you know, I exercise the same, I eat the same. Why am I fat around the middle? Well, you're sirtuin deficient. So one is the mastermind of all of your cells. So 1, 6, and 7 live in your nucleus. 3, 4, and 5 live in your mitochondria. 2 sort of flits around your cell. 6 is really interesting because 6 controls all of your DNA for the most part. It controls if it's heterochromatin or euchromatin, meaning like all sort of like, euchromatin is, well, it's hard to describe. If it's all mushed up versus kind of spread out, your DNA sort of spreads out and gets mucked up after a course of time, but you want it nice and organized, and that's controlled by SIRT6. All your DNA repair mechanisms are controlled by SIRT6 in conjunction with SIRT1, but 6 is incredibly important. And then SIRT3 is the mastermind of your mitochondria. So if you are SIRT3 deficient, your energy levels are going to plummet. So it's all sort of correlated. So you sort of focus on the sirtuins. What do the sirtuins need? Once everything's turned on, then you got to fix everything else. So it's all very sort of interlinked. But you're right, I'm a little bit sirtuin obsessive at this very moment.
Well,
Probably because I just went through this big analysis of all of them, because I was like, oh, I got to fix
for
that.
people who hadn't heard it, because it sounds like they're really important biomarkers of aging, because, you know, remembering that everything you're feeling, basically the things you feel and you dislike, are all conditions of aging. You know, the not sleeping, the lack of energy, you know, I found some measurements the other day, and I was like, wow, do you know, in the last year and a half I've lost 4 kilos. That was my waist measurement. We measured my waist and went, it's exactly the same. Like, how do you lose 4 kilos but your waist measurement's the same? It's called old age, you know. So the sirtuins sounds like the biomarkers that cover all facets of aging. Are they your top
So it's
three?
really funny. Well, so the answer is they all overlap. Like, I like to divide things into 7 piles, but in reality, they're all sort of crisscrossing and very interrelated. These are like the grandmasters, right?
Like the
grandmaster must say, this is what we're going to do, right? That being said, if you don't have the ability to do it, then it doesn't matter what the grandmaster says, right? On the other hand, like, so everything has to sort of be in its place, right? Like, if you activate your sirtuin 3 to say, okay, now our mitochondria are going to be optimized, your mitochondria will be like, well, you know what, we're nicotinamide deficient, I can't do this. Quite sorry, right? Or, yeah, our mitochondria like, okay, we're turned on, but we're making far too many free radicals, so we just blew ourselves up. Well, that's not good either. So it all sort of works in conjunction. And I am being sirtuin obsessive, because I was just trying to find ways to maximize sirtuin 3 and 6. And I'm very excited because I discovered that fucodan, which is a long molecule that you find in seaweed, it's extremely good at activating SIRT6. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. It does a variety of things, other things as well. But I'm like, oh my God. So now I'm like a seaweed addict. That'll pass until next week, because now I'm working on heat shock proteins, and then I'll be obsessed with like whatever that one is, and it'll just get thrown on the pile. But it's just very important that we address sort of all of these issues. But yes, cellular homeostasis, or the control of cellular homeostasis as the master regulators, essential.
Awesome. I guess, yeah, and they're like the boss. But as you say, if you haven't given the workers the tools and skills, it doesn't matter what the boss says. It's
bingo.
It's
absolutely
all part and parcel. I love that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so panacea, we got to PAN. All right, so this is where it kind of breaks down. Now there's 2 C's, right? It's not exactly panacea. The first one is curcumin. And everyone always says, oh, I put turmeric in my food. And the answer is, that's nice. I'm sure your food tastes good. It's not good enough. right? It just isn't, right? So 1 to 3% of most turmeric is actually curcumin, and natural curcumin is not very bioavailable. And earlier I mentioned that, yeah, some of this is natural, but it's sort of not natural anymore. Curcumin is so amazing, but the bioavailability is so poor that there's been this, like, I call it the arms race of how to make curcumin better. 15 years ago, they added pepper to it. It's like very old fashioned. Pepper is kind of cool. It sort of shuts down your liver enzymes temporarily, so the curcumin would last longer. I'm like, well, that's kind of smart. But now what we do is we put it in different vehicles to make it last longer. So my favorite, it's in a nanomycel. And so it's, 277 plus or minus times more bioavailable than standard curcumin. And the reason curcumin is so important is that, I mean, it does a variety of things. Like, it's a fantastic epigenetic modifier. It's great for reducing lipofuscin accumulation. But most importantly, it's an anti-inflammatory. It is a monster anti-inflammatory. And that is huge because you become systemically inflamed over the course of time. And inflammation causes DNA damage, it causes protein malfunction, and ultimately it causes cancer and disease. So that's my curcumin story.
And I mean, yeah, the inflammation story is also so multifaceted, isn't it? It's because you've got your silent inflammation, and then you've got inflammation which is causing disease, and then you've got whether you know it or not, inflammation is destroying your youthful appearance as well. So it's all so curcumin. And how did you say that the new delivery system? What's that called again?
So I take mine in what's called a nanomycel, but you can get it nanomycel, but you can also get it in liposomal. And I never like to recommend brands because everyone's on a different continent all the time. But if you can find something that says increased bioavailability, that's what you want. Liposomal is going to be the easiest one to find. I think only in the US can we get the nanomycel stuff.
Okay. Yeah, we all
anyway.
So biohackers find a way, though, don't they, Sandy?
I know, right? I know. I had to bribe a Russian to get me special eye drops, like, because we will find a way. Okay. Last on the list is carnosine. Carnosine is actually a supplement because you have carnosine in your body already. It is a naturally occurring dipeptide. And what's really cool about carnosine is two things. Number one, it sits in your muscles for the most part, and it's a buffer. So I love this because when you exercise and you get acidosis in your muscles, it actually quelches the acidosis, so your muscles don't burn when you're done exercising, which is fantastic. So that's not longevity, but it's just a cool thing. The reason that we like carnosine is because it's a transglycosylating agent. So tenet 7, which we haven't really mentioned, is damage from glucose. Glycation is brutal. All of your proteins and your DNA gets glycated, covered in sugar. I always like to say it's sticky on the outside, sticky on the inside. It also creates things called AGEs, which are advanced glycation end products. And this destroys collagen, which is the big reason that your skin droops over the course of time because your collagen breaks. So lifting glucose off of your tissues, once it's set, it's really hard to get off, but there are intermediate or beginning or intermediate processes whereby carnosine will attract the glucose molecule and you'll excrete it, decreasing your glucose load. That's why carnosine's cool.
And I feel like carnosine is one of the very few supplements that you can take that you actually like immediately feel better. Like the other ones, you feel good because you're like, I'm doing something good for me and I know this is preventative and I'm doing everything I can. But carnosine, you actually feel quite energized. And as you're saying, and notice it.
Yeah. Well, the other funny thing is you take too much of it at one time, you get this buzzy, burny feeling that lasts for like a few minutes and you like go, oh, that's working, right? It's kind of this great, like, it's just so the problem here with carnosine, because it's a supplement, you have an enzyme called carnosine-ACE. So your body gets rid of the carnosine. So the more carnosine you take, the more carnosine ACE you make, so the less carnosine you end up with. So it's just sort of like escalating war. So this is one of those things that I recommend that people cycle so that you let the enzymes go back down, and then you go back to taking more carnosine, and then your levels will be higher again. So, people like, well, how many days do I have to take it? And the answer is whatever people can remember is absolutely fine. I tend to take it for 3 weeks and then come off for a week and something of that nature. But it's, whatever people can remember to do is absolutely fine. The idea is just letting your responsive enzymes sort of come back to base.
Which actually is a nice segue for me to a question I had for you. But so the shopping list for people is pterostilbene, astaxanthin, some sort of NAD precursor, curcumin, liposomal or better, and carnosine. Now, I wanted to ask you, because most biohackers I know will say, oh, it says on the bottle to take 25 milligrams a day, so I'm going to take 300 milligrams today because I'm committed. But one thing that you do is you often recommend a lower dose of things.
I do. So if you are only going to take 2, 5, maybe up to 10 things, a reasonably normal dose is fine. I'm convinced that people on the bottle always want you to take far too much so that they can sell you far too much. You don't need as much as they tell you, right? So I usually tell people 3/4 of the dose on the bottle if you're taking up to 10 things, below 10 things. So I take 70 things, and I will tell you that they're all synergistic. Whenever there's a study that demonstrates metformin and berberine are a good example. If you take them both, you need less of each.
Of course.
If you take one free radical scavenger, you need X, right? If you take 4 free radical scavengers throughout the day and they're different and they get metabolized differently, you can get away with taking half doses, right? The idea is to, and plus some of these things have side effects. Some have GI side effects, some of them, standard side effects, these sort of stuff. But you can reduce relative risk of side effects by taking more things to hit the same targets, but with lower doses. And every time I read a study that demonstrates a synergism of things that overlap, the doses are significantly decreased. And it just makes absolute sense. From a pharmacology user point of view, it absolutely makes sense. You don't need the high doses if you're having overlapping strategies.
That's interesting, because I must admit, even myself, when I look on the backs of the bottles of things and it's a synergistic blend, and I go, oh gosh, no, there's just not enough ficitin in there. I know that I need X amount, but that's what a synergy is in essence, isn't it? It boosts it all.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Although I have to tell you, I can't stand the bottles that have 20 things in them. There is no way in hell that you can get all that stuff. And then you're back up to taking and then it says take 12 of them. And you're like, well, that didn't make any sense, because then what happens is people come to me and they're like, oh, I'm on this bottle and this bottle and this bottle. And I got to go through and take apart all the bottles and add up all the columns to figure out what they're actually taking. I'm like, oh, this is just insane. So I think that supplements you have 3, 4, 5, fine. Up to 20, that's just nuts. But what they do try to do is they do try to use the synergism thing. But I think at that point, it just gets to be too much.
Oh no, I think the 20, that's not synergism, that's just marketing.
Yes, spot on. Yes.
When I see those, I'm just like, no, thank you. And now you're marketing it as I've got this in me, but it's 0.001 of a milligram. I'm like, no, now I don't trust your company. I'm not buying it.
I know, right? Ugh. But so it's funny that you mentioned fisetin. I love fisetin, but there's 2 doses for fisetin. I'm sure you know this, right? There's the daily dose of fisetin that hits all of your standard fisetin activities, but to truly use it as a senolytic, you need very high doses intermittently.
So this is different to the lower dose thing.
Right. So you take low dose, low dose, low dose, low dose. So there's senescent cells. This would be in tenet 6 of individual cell needs. Senescent cells, stem cells, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, senescent cells are cells that we want to get rid of. Some people call them zombie cells. I call them grumpy old man cells. And I do that because they change shape, they get fatter, they're disgruntled, they just exude negativity. Anyway, because I just think it's fun.
They annoy the people around them.
They won't go anywhere. They're just annoying, and they exude annoyance. That's what a senescent cell is. Anyway, all senescent cells are not the same because they come from normal cells that experience DNA damage, and then they become senescent. So there's many subtypes of senescent cells. So you need many different ways to get rid of the senescent cells. So of the things that do get rid of them, there's fisetin, there's quercetin, there's dinacetab, there's a few antibiotics that do it. So what I do is every month or two, I'll take high dose of one of those things and then rotate it to make sure that I try to whack off, a decent population of all the senescent cells over the course of time. You don't want to get rid of too many senescent cells. Actually, I love Bill Andrews because he always says, don't tell old people to get rid of their senescent cells because they will have nothing left and they will just disappear into a pile of sand.
Yeah.
which I think is a fantastic visual.
Yeah.
But when you're not ancient, you do want to get rid of your senescent cells.
Yes, and so what age is that? Because we've sort of bandied this around as well too, at what age do you have enough senescent cells that you just want to be able to kill off a few of them?
I think that, I think you start aging at 35. Real, true, annoying stuff starts happening mid 40s. Somewhere, senescent cells are going to take off somewhere between 45 and 55. And there's a huge variability because different people clearly look better or worse in that time period. I mean, some 50-year-olds look like death and other ones look like 20-year-olds. Tom Cruise is clearly doing rather well. Val Kilmer, not so much, right? I love that movie because you see the difference in aging, right? Some people fare way better than others. So senescent cells tend to gather where you have trauma or pathology. If you've had cancer and you've had chemotherapy or radiation is just horrific creator of senescent cells. As well, if you are immune deficient, senescent cells get created and your immune system is supposed to get rid of them, right? So either your senescent cell count goes up. Well, let me back up. You have two problems, right? As you get older, your senescent cell goes up, count goes up, and then your ability to get rid of them goes down, right? So hopefully we can bring our senescent cell load down and bring our immune system up so that we maintain, again, cellular homeostasis. But in any event, if you have more trauma, more pathology, exactly, whatever, your senescent load goes up. As you get older, your immune system fails or you're immune suppressed for whatever reason, then your senescent cell load just skyrockets. So depending on who you are and what your pathology is will determine at what age you really need to attack the problem.
And you would maybe from 70, 75 onwards, you would perhaps stop trying to get rid of them so quickly so you don't.
I would not be so aggressive. Well, but it also depends, right? If you started out younger and maybe you don't have as many, you would just continue it. But yeah, I would not be as aggressive if I was in my 70s starting this out for the first time.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny because the conversation I had with Bill began around there's some skin creams now coming out, jumping on the telomere bandwagon, but taking the different angle, which is you've got to get rid of senescent cells. And Bill cracked me up. He's like, you couldn't sell that to an old person. Their face would be gone. It was the same thing.
Yes.
And I
yes.
was like, yeah. He's like, they have to be really careful if it actually works. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point.
No, and it's true because when you're old, you have, the stem cells in your dermal epidermal junction layer, you're not going to make any new cells. So they'll all fall off and then you're just be one skeleton. That would be rather terrible.
No wrinkles.
Good point. You could buff up that skeleton. Oh, that'd be amazing.
So we're putting fisetin on the list. And again, fisetin it's a really inexpensive product to use well, but really effective.
No, it's really not. I use the liposomal. I've decided I'm trying to convert everything I take into liposomal if it's available. Sometimes things are and sometimes they're not, because the bioavailability is a little higher. So recommending a dose is really hard. So it depends on the formulation, but I take a low dose every day and then I spike it probably 5 to 10 times for 2 days out of every other month.
Great. Good advice.
Something like that.
Now, another supplement, which I've heard you speak of, is hyaluronic acid. And I learned from you, of course, because you're amazing and very, very clever. But you were saying if you're already dehydrated and you drink water, you're just going to pee it out. And I already knew that, but I wasn't sure why. And you were saying it's to do with hyaluronic acid within the body. And, everyone sort of thinks of hyaluronic acid with skin. You forget about a cell as a cell. So your cells are all within you as well. I've never ever thought to take hyaluronic acid as a supplement. I ordered some last night, by the way. But
Oh, good.
yeah, tell us about that and about dehydration and how it works with that.
So what's interesting is it's a molecular sponge. One molecule, I guess it's a chain, right? And you can have short chain, long chain, and medium chain, and that's sort of, they call it low, high, or medium molecular weight hyaluronic acid. Obviously, the longer the chain, the more water is going to hang on to it. But on average, one molecule of hyaluronic acid clings to about 6,000 molecules of water. So it's a sponge. And we make hyaluronic acid, obviously, in our bodies. And as we get older, we have less and less. So we look a little dehydrated and decrepit. But what's really important is in the cavities of your body that are fluid filled. So for example, your intervertebral discs that are very spongy, they need to maintain hydration. And over the course of time, they don't. They get kind of flat and kind of crappy. And then you do something crazy and you squish them. And then you have intervertebral joint collapse, right? With pain and nerve damage. Joint spaces collapse because that fluid sort of dissipates. Your eyes aren't so full. All sorts of crazy things. So anything that is really mushy is hyaluronic acid. And as you get older and you don't have it, you're just not as mushy. So you look kind of desiccated. And everyone carries around big giant gallons of water, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because again, as you said it, you're just going to pee it out. It needs molecules to stick to. So, given, a few weeks of hyaluronic supplementation, you actually can make a big difference.
Would you feel the difference in your joints and your eyes? And
I think so. I mean, the answer is I never feel like anything's wrong, so I never feel like anything gets better. But I have had many people say that their joints feel significantly better.
Yeah, interesting. It was never one that I had ever thought of on my list. So I've already shopped it, but it should be on.
Okay. And it comes in liposomal too. I mean, which I'm sort of excited about. Granted, I don't have a lab, so I can't absolutely guarantee you that it's more bioavailable, but it seems like it should be.
Anyway. Makes sense. Yeah. Now, jury's out. Jury's always been out for me on collagen supplements, and this is why the jury's out for me, because I'm like, logically, it's a protein. You eat it, you poop it. But then the jury's out for me because I actually see it making a difference on people who take it. So I'm like, I can't bring my head to make a decision on that. Give me your opinion on
okay. So here's what really happens. When you eat collagen, right? Your body breaks it down into di and tripeptides, right? You absorb those di and tripeptides, and they serve as molecular signaling molecules. These go to your fibroblasts, and it triggers your fibroblasts to make more collagen. So collagen you're eating is rarely what you see being produced, but it's signaling molecules that tell you to make more. And you can also take that signaling molecule, break it down into individual amino acids, and use that as building blocks potentially. People are always obsessed. Is it hydrolyzed? Is it marine? Is it land animal? It doesn't really matter. In my book, I kid around that Jell-O shots are just as good because Jell-O is collagen. And, you might as well just enjoy drinking it or pounding it or slurping it or whatever one does to a Jell-O shot.
So it's way
in fact, since I'm so good at digressing, I went on this whole what a Jell-O shot is and when they invented Jell-O and blah, 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 because I just thought it was funny. But Jell-O is collagen, and collagen does help. It really does.
Yeah, because, excuse me, I think visually people are thinking, I eat it and then that collagen makes its way throughout my body. But it's way more complex. It's being broken down in your body's
very much more complex. The other aspect of this you have to sort of think about is that your microbiota, like the bugs in and on your body, all right, there are more of them than you. This is a weird concept.
It's
right?
crazy.
If you took your body and ground up all the cells and put you on a pile and them on a pile, there are more of them than you, right? that's on your skin, and it's amazing. They protect you. And so I get so angry when people use like this antibacterial skin goop, like every few hours, like you're killing your microbiotic, shield essentially from the, anyway, whatever. I won't, that's another tangent. But so the bacteria in your gut, and this is where this is going, it's extremely specific to you and what you eat. And as you get older, the diversity of your gut bacteria changes. And your gut bacteria will depend on, if you take something, whatever it is, they get to it first. They're going to digest it into whatever it is that they want. They're going to take out their good nutrients, and the metabolites are, for the most part, are what get absorbed into you. So you are determining their populations, and their populations are determining you. So giving them collagen actually changes what's in your gut for the better, as well as helping you. So there's a lot of things that we take, and it's not the actual thing. It's not the molecule that you were taking that's actually getting into you. It's the metabolites. And that's why I frequently see people say, well, it works for me, but it doesn't work for you. Because your bacteria determine the metabolites that are getting absorbed into your vasculature. So it's not as easy or straightforward as one might think.
No, that's so interesting. I've never heard collagen being associated with the gut microbiota.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Because I really want to upgrade mine. I get
Either
annoyed
that or you
with my
can
gut.
get a poop transplant. You can actually get a poop transplant. I think it's fantastic.
You can. Yeah. I just, my gut is so sensitive. Like I am allergic to dairy. And if I have anything dairy, I get big lumps on my face. And I'm like, I own a skincare company. There's never a good time to have a lump on your face.
Oh yeah, no, that's not good. That's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wish it wasn't
It's
so
funny.
sensitive.
I'm the opposite. I have an iron stomach. I can eat anything, anytime, anywhere, and nothing happens. I must have like the world's best gut.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Well, the collagen's on my list now too. I was like, I'm going to see if Sandy convinces me about collagen, and you actually hands down have. So there we go. That's on
Oh,
my shopping
good.
list too.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Can you, because you talk about cells, it's all about cell health. Can you explain what methylation is and why it's so important?
Sure. Okay. So this falls into the category of epigenetics. And if your audience are truly biohackers, they're going to know what epigenetics is. But most people do not. So the very remedial definition of epigenetics is you start with your DNA, which is a spiraling helix, as defined by Watson and Clark so many years ago, I think 1957, I think. Anyway, on top of that structure are what I call decorations. And your DNA gets methylated. So a methyl group, in my book, I draw like a lollipop because I just think it's funny. These little things stick onto your DNA and they serve as roadblocks. And if a particular aspect of your DNA is methylated and it's blocked, it cannot be transcribed, and therefore you cannot create a protein out of that section. The control of where these methyl groups go is the study of epigenetics. So that's methylation. The other part of epigenetics is histones. DNA gets wrapped around histone balls, and they always draw it in pictures like 8 balls. So it's 2 layers of 4. So it's 8 balls that sit on top of each other. The DNA wraps around it, eats up 147 base pairs, and then the histones themselves then get more stuff on them. They get phosphorylated, they get acetylated, a variety of things happen. There's like 100 different epigenetic mechanisms on top of a histone. But again, they serve as roadblocks, and they determine if the DNA in that area can get unraveled and used. So this is a control mechanism for your genetics, or for your DNA. Now, back to methylation. Over the course of time, your methylation pattern changes. Some areas get hypermethylated and some areas get hypomethylated. So it's not one way or the other. It's a homeostatic balance of your methylation pattern. And this is what determines what we call an epigenetic clock. Steve Horvath came up with the first one many years ago. He looked at 363 areas of your DNA and determined what should be hypo versus hypermethylated, and therefore figured out what your physiologic age might be compared to your chronologic age. The clocks are now extremely more specific, and there's more areas of your DNA, but it was sort of earth-shattering at the time. So control of your methylation of your DNA is sort of essential, and I throw that into the epigenetic diet basket of how to take care of your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
How about that? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I guess, and it was. And in essence, I guess the lollipops are the switches to really like break it down when people talk about putting, with epigenetics, some you want to turn on, some you want to turn off. So those lollipops are like the light switches and some light
Yeah,
switches are
well, they're
stuck
like,
and broken.
you know what? I like to think of them as stop signs, right?
Yeah.
Little, right? Like if there's a lot of methylation there, that DNA is stopped,
Mm.
right? But you have lots of enzymes. You have methyl transferases, you have demethylators. There's this whole balance of methyls on, methyls off, acetyls on, acetyls off, blah, 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 blah. And the balance of those enzymes control what gets translated and transcribed essentially, right? And then the tightness of your DNA, if your DNA is very tight, even if it's not methylated, the transcription mechanisms can't get in there to find whatever protein or piece that they're looking for to transcribe for a particular protein. And that is controlled by your sirtuins. So again, it all sort of, it's very intermingled. And we don't understand all of it per se. But yeah, I mean, methyl groups basically block transcription.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's important.
And there's no easy fix to that, is there? There's no one shoe fits all. It's back to the rating system and covering everything, every stick of dynamite, every tenant.
Yeah, and that's what the number system's for, because if people say, you know what, I want to take X number of items, well, what are you going to choose, right? So you're going to pick things that are important. If you're going to pick stuff that's important for your age sort of demographic, right? Because different people, different ages have different problems. Then you're going to go with, okay, well, I have a predisposition for diabetes, therefore glycation is important. Therefore, I'm going to heavily weight tenets 7. Versus I am completely and utterly healthy. I want just a fantastic distribution of all of the tenets. And then it's just a numbers game, right? People make charts and they fill out their little numbers and they're like, aha, category 4 is lacking. So then you add more stuff for category 4. So there's many ways to sort of skin the cat once you have the information to figure out how best to optimize your personal protocol. And it isn't one size fits all. What's good for, you is not going to be the same thing for me.
Mm. Yeah, which is again why I love the rating system. Hey, we've got
Thank
lots
you.
of advanced biohackers listening to this. And this week, your new favorite breakthroughs for the biohackers to add to their adjuncts or supplements.
That's my newest thing. All right. So I have been obsessed with heat shock proteins this week because I was trying to figure out, like, hey, what are we missing, right? So in the proteostasis realm, there's not a whole lot you can do for protein. There's like stuff you can do for DNA repair mechanisms, but proteostasis is tough. So to upregulate your chaperones via the heat shock method, I've been looking into something called celestial. And this comes from this fantastic plant called the thunder vine god plant.
I love it already.
Right. Thunder god. Right. It's so cool. Originally, I was taking it because it actually helped block COVID. And I never did get COVID. So that whatever I was doing was very useful. I don't know if it was this or not. I think it was the thunder god part. But this is an extremely fantastic upregulator of your heat shock proteins. Which is something that is really hard to do. There are not many things that do this. Anyway, so I'm very excited about this new finding. And of course, I was just on Amazon looking for the best thunder god supplements, blah, blah, blah. The caveat to this, however, is that it can cause problems with fertility. So for men out there that are looking to still have children and live forever, maybe this isn't the one for you, but if you're done having children, then it's kind of a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. The thunder god name is misleading when it comes to men.
Right? Right. Well, Zeus did not want any more children, right? I think he was done. Like something came out of his side or his head or something. I don't remember my Greek mythology, but like, I don't think kids were big in his world.
Yeah. He was done. All right. So our advanced people are going to be shopping for their thunder god vine
Yes.
as well as everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, just one more question for you. Thank you for your time, by the way, Sandy. I know you're such a busy lady. But because this is something that anyone can do, right? So your books, they're not diet books. You're not talking about carbohydrates or losing weight or anything like that. But calorie restriction is always mentioned when it comes to longevity. Mm-hmm. How important is it? How does it work? Is it a fad, a myth? Is it a way people have sold diet books? What's your opinion on it?
No, it's absolutely true. So it turned out that caloric restriction actually is beneficial in almost every tenet of aging. One of the big reasons that it works is that it activates an enzyme called AMP kinase. That controls your energy homeostasis. And by your cells thinking that you are energy deficient, excuse me, it sort of puts your body and cells in a state of hibernation, which encourages longevity. So caloric restriction is absolutely real. I mean, it is a fad. People like to think like, I'm going to starve myself for X number of days and it's kind of cool, whatever. But in terms of real science, it's spot on. I have tried to do it and I became a royal bitch. So I'm not really good at it. I take what I call caloric restriction mimetics, which tell my body that I'm starving and it activates my AMP kinase artificially. But for people that, are hardcore, caloric restriction is absolutely spot on.
And is that a prescription, Sandy, or can anyone get that?
What's the caloric mimetic?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a variety of them. Oh yeah, there's tons of them and they're all over the counter. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Because it's sort of, to me, and maybe I'm not hardcore enough, but it's not one of those things which is sustainable. Like, yeah, I can pop as many pills as I need to a day, but suddenly having to be grumpy every other day or looking at what time I finish eating. I mean, I'm just too busy living life.
No, exactly. And that is why I do what I do, right? I don't starve myself. That's ridiculous. I'm actually kind of famous for being a junk food junkie. However, if you can manipulate your metabolism or your metabolic pathways, then, we win. That's kind of cool. You're right. And the people around me were not happy when I tried to calorically restrict. I was just.
You would be living forever with no friends though.
Oh yeah. It would be a very lonely life. I guarantee it.
Sandy, you are brilliant. I have chewed your ear off for quite some time, and I'm just going to have to get you back again whenever you're free, because there's so many areas that we didn't go into, because your wealth of knowledge is amazing. So I want to direct people to buy your book. We can put the links. I believe it's available freely on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yep, Amazon.
Yep. So Dr. Sandra Kaufmann, Why We Age and How to Stop It, and Aging Solutions. You'll find everything she's talked about here and more. And they're amazing books. They're as easy to read as Sandy is to chat to. So I do highly recommend those for everyone. Sandy, thank you so much for your time. It's been invaluable. My little notes here are full, as is my shopping list. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. And I would love to come back because this is super fun. I love this.
Okay.